Now that we're all set up and we have a little bit idea of how Fusion works, let's take a look at our shot and see what needs to happen here. So he raises his gun and he shoots once, pulls the trigger, and walks forward. So what needs to happen to make this look convincing, look like a real gun? And when I say real gun, I mean a real gun in a movie. I mean, not a super realistic gun, because super realistic guns don't actually look as cool as the crazy awesome guns that you see in movies. So we're going for movie realism. If you're a gun expert, you're probably going to be triggered, get it? Triggered by this, but it's going to be okay. It's all for the excitement. So the first thing I want to do is figure out the point where he shoots. An easy way to do that is just to page through with the left and right arrows on the keyboard. And we're going to kind of just see where his finger comes back and hits that trigger. I'd say probably right there. Let's call it right there. So we're at frame 229. This is where all the magic is going to happen. The great thing about a muzzle flash doing VFX for a gun is it's generally just one frame. That means that you don't really have to animate a bunch. You don't really have to track a bunch of stuff. That's more advanced stuff anyway. And so this is a great shot for us to start out with learning a little bit the basics of compositing, because we're really only going to worry about one frame here. So what's the first thing that needs to happen? Well, this gun needs to shoot fire, basically. It needs to have a muzzle flash. There are 100 different ways that you could create a muzzle flash, but what we're going to do is use one that we've already created. So let's go up to the media pool in the upper left-hand corner. And under this bin list here, I'm going to right click and make a new bin. We'll call this VFX. We don't want this in the video. We want it in the master, VFX. So VFX stands for visual effects. And now let's import. I'll right click and import media. And under our work files, under media, there's a folder called visual effects. And we can kind of preview this. We have a bunch of different effects that we're going to be using throughout this training. But what we're interested in right now are the muzzle flashes. So I'm going to shift select all of these muzzle flashes and hit open. This is just to give us a little bit of a variety. We probably only need one, but I like this one. Pick whichever one you like. I like the ones that are a little bit more ragged. These are a little bit smoother, but you can choose whichever one you want. And what we'll do, a lot like you just drag something to the timeline, we can grab this and drag it into our flow down here, and that will make another node. Let's talk about this node. This is a media in node. It's the same thing as this node, but instead of grabbing a shot from the timeline, which is what's happening here, we're grabbing a shot from our media pool. Again, these each have one job, and this one says, hey, grab this muzzle flash from the media pool, and we're going to do something with it. Pretty quickly, this is going to get complicated, so we're going to start right now being good about renaming stuff. To rename something, just select a node and hit F2 on the keyboard. And I'm going to call this muzzle flash underscore MI. What I like to do, and I think is probably industry standard of some kind, is do underscore whatever this original node is. So MI stands for media in. Muzzle flash is obviously what we are using. So we hit OK. And now we know that this is a media in node, but we have a better name for it. Let's do the same thing for media in 1, F2. Let's call this original shot MI. Okay, so now we've done a couple things. We obviously have our shot here loaded up, and we have our muzzle flash loaded up. But look, nothing's happening. Why is that? Well, it's because we don't have this hooked up. Let's preview our muzzle flash. And the way that we do that is by loading it into one of these viewers. If you mouse over a node, you'll see there's two little dots here, and these stand for the left view and the right view. If I mouse over this left black dot and click on that, look what happens. It loads that up in the left-hand viewer. And then if you look really closely down here at the media out, you see we have those two dots, but the right dot is white. That means that we're viewing this on the right-hand view. And remember how I said that this is actually showing what the person who watches our movie is going to see? The reason why it is right now is because we have media out loaded up in the second viewer, which means that whatever we're rendering to the timeline is what we're previewing here on the right. You can also load things by selecting a node and hitting 1 or 2 on the keyboard. So I can hit 1 on the keyboard and load this on the left, 2 to load it on the right. Again, 1 for muzzle flash on the left, 2 for muzzle flash on the right. And you'll see this difference of this color here on the right-hand side. That's because we have our LUT on, remember? And so that's what it's going to look like when it's color corrected. So we need to adjust for that when we do our composite. I'll come down to our nodes and hit 2 on media out so that we can load up our final shot in our right viewer. And I generally like to work like this, just have media out loaded up in our right viewer and then preview stuff with the left viewer by selecting a node and hitting 1 to load it up. That just makes a lot of sense to me. You can do it however you want. So now that we have this muzzle flash here in our flow, we're not doing anything with it. How do we add this muzzle flash to our shot to make it look like this gun is shooting fire? Well, I want you to start thinking about composites in this way. Anytime that you want to do something, you got to figure out what needs to happen and then just pick the node that will do that. So right now we have both of our media loaded up, but now we need to put this muzzle flash over our original shot. And there happens to be a node that puts things over other things, and that's called a merge. That's up here to the right of our second little divider here. It's called a merge node. We'll grab that and drag that in. Again, this has one job. All it does is it takes something and puts it over something else. The thing that we want to put it over is this original shot, right? So let's unlink our original shot and our media out. We'll take the output of our original shot and put it into the merge. We'll take our merge and connect it to the media out, and we'll drag this down. So right now, what's happening is nothing, because really what we're doing is we're giving it an instruction, right? Open the original shot, put something over it, but we haven't told it what to put over it, so it's nothing, and then render the shot. So great, we're doing that. To add something to the foreground of our merge, you'll see that we have these two little inputs here. A lot of nodes just have a yellow input. A merge has a yellow input and a green input. So if we take this output and we drop it onto the merge, that gets connected to our green input, which is our foreground of our merge. And if you mouse over these little arrows, you'll see this is the foreground, this is the background. Anytime that you get confused about where you connect something, you can always mouse over the inputs here. Ooh, this blue one is called something called an effect mask. We'll mess with that in a little bit. Let's look at our final shot. This is from media out 1. And look, we have our muzzle flash over everything. The problem is that we can't see anything. It's just a giant muzzle flash with nothing behind it. So let's change that. The way that we adjust how something goes over something else is in the merge node. So let's select the merge node and we'll go up to the inspector, because if we have the merge node selected, we can adjust kind of how it acts and its properties and everything in the inspector, right? This has all the options for how this piece of footage is treated when it's put over the background shot. And here under apply mode, where it says normal, let's switch this to screen. If we click on that, we'll see that we're getting somewhere, because our muzzle flash is over our background shot and it's set to screen. And what screen does is it basically takes away the black pixels and just gives you the brighter pixels. So that's perfect for something that's on black like this. You'll also notice on the viewer here, we have this little widget. So we can move things around really easily. And what that really does is change our center X and Y here in the inspector. And I can also grab the edge of this little circle and I can rotate it just like this. That adjusts our angle. So you can rotate it here or on the widget in the center. It doesn't really matter. But what we want to do is line this up to look like it's coming out of the gun. So let's move this over. We're going to make it a little bit smaller. So I'll take this size down a little bit, something like that. You want about twice as long as the gun generally, which seems really huge. And it is, but it looks cool. And that's what we're after. So we'll adjust the angle and put this down in front of the gun. And you'll see where we're getting at here. So he's kind of shooting up here. Look at that. That looks pretty sick. So if you've been following along, you just made a composite in Fusion. That's super rad. It looks like the gun is exploding. And this is at frame 229. Now let's select our media out so we don't have that outline. I'll make this a little bigger just so it's easier for us to see when we're zoomed out. And now we have a pretty cool effect going on. This is something like if you've used Photoshop or anything, this should make a lot of sense. But here's the problem. We're working with the video, right? So if we go back and forth, you'll see that just kind of sticks there. And that's not right. That's not right at all. So what we need to do is have this just show up for that one frame where he shoots at frame 229. And all the other times we want it off. So we're basically just blinking this on for one frame right here. And again, that's great because we don't have to move it around. It just happens for one frame. So how do we do that? Well, remember, a merge node controls everything about how something goes over something else. And included in that is its opacity, which Fusion calls blend. So that's just the transparency of this. So if I take this blend down, let's see, we can kind of turn it off and turn it back on. And what we want to do is have this just go bam, like that for one frame. So we're already going to dive into a little bit of animation, but even though we're not moving things around, we're just changing some of these properties over time. We're going to do this with keyframes. And if you're unfamiliar with keyframes, a keyframe is telling a property to be a certain number at a certain time. So what we're going to do is at frame 229, we want this blend to be at 1. We want this to be fully on. So I'm going to set a keyframe by clicking this little diamond right here. And when it turns red, that means that there is a keyframe on that frame. So it's going to make sure that at 229, this is at 1. And now, if I kind of click off of this and hit left or right on the keyboard, I can go back and forth to different frames. So what we want to do is go one frame before at 228. And we're going to take this blend and we're just going to bring it all the way down. And because we have our keyframe already selected, it's going to automatically add another keyframe here. So at 228, we're at 0, and I'll hit right on the keyboard. At 229, we're at 1. We're going to go one more frame over to the right at 230, and we're going to turn the blend all the way down again. So what we're doing is telling this to just turn everything that's happening on for one frame, and then turn it back off again. So this is actually the majority of this effect. So if we play this back, you'll see we get actually a pretty cool looking effect. And all we've done is just put a still on for one frame. Isn't that awesome? Getting this 80% there is really fun, pretty easy. If we're really on a time crunch, and this is something like a low budget TV series, and we have to do, 50 of these shots in one day, we could probably stop there and it would probably be okay. But I'm going to show you the few extra tricks to get you kind of past that 80% good and make a really convincing effect. We'll dive into that in the next lesson.